Hi guys, welcome to another book review. Um, the reason for the hot pink neon yellow shirt will make sense in a minute. Um, this was also just a random find as I was perusing in Target, one of my favorite places. Um, and I don't know, I just saw it on the shelf. It was bright, colorful, and I thought, oh, I like those nostalgia vibes it gives, so I picked it up, not knowing really anything about the book, anything about the author. Um, so that was an interesting thing to do for me because I usually have at least one book in mind when I'm perusing. Um, so this book is written by Kate Kennedy. It's One in a Millennial. I didn't know this, but she does run a podcast called Be There in Five. Um, and I guess this book started as she was on speaking engagements and she started kind of reading some poetry and excerpts, and someone was like, yeah, that tracks, that could be a book. And so here it is. At least that was my understanding, what I got from reading the book. I'm sure Kate will be more than happy to correct me if I'm wrong. I also just started following on Instagram as I was doing more of a deep dive into her love of millennial culture, because she still talks about this on her podcast. So that being said, the bright neon pink shirt is a Spice Girls t-shirt that still fits me after having twins, so I'm giving myself some serious props. And I was so excited to go to their reunion tour when I was fresh 21. It was one of the best ways I could have spent my money at the time. So Kate, I too have a deep love of the Spice Girls. And for those who are millennials, this is going to take you back in a nice trip down memory lane for the most part. There were certain things I couldn't relate to in this book. Examples off the top of my head: your love of American Girl dolls was not my thing. My grandma gave me a really creepy porcelain doll when I was little, and I just never gravitated towards the American Girl dolls. Your religious upbringing, also not a factor for me. That possibly saved me some of the issues that you talk about in the book, because she does talk about how being a pretty religious kid impacted her life, especially when it came to relationships and dating and her own idea of self-worth, and gender roles, that kind of stuff. So that was kind of interesting to read about because that's not how I grew up. Also, your relatively happy childhood, that was also something that I did not have. But there were other things I could definitely relate to. The joy of the burned CD where you picked every single song and it was magical. Again, love of the Spice Girls. It was deep. And I had the Spice World poster. I watched Spice World, I'm pretty sure, until that VHS tape broke. As you can see, I am a millennial. Look at my side part. Isn't it nice? Uh, you know, some of the trends and stuff, limited to, she talks about that, and mall culture. She talks about, of course, the starlets. At the time growing up, we had Lindsay Lohan, your Britney Spears, Paris Hilton. Just those pretty paparazzi times where it was like 1 minute they were, talked about in a pretty positive way, and then the next minute we were slut shaming them in the media. So talks about that culture a lot, also how that impacted her self-esteem. Also interesting. I also did appreciate the chapter where you talked about kind of branching out and doing your own business, because I work in career services and I deal with a lot of people who really want to work for themselves, and so I'm that nice person that is kind of okay, Do you though? Like, do you have a full understanding of what it takes? Do you have a full understanding that you may really struggle to pay your bills, or you might have to do a full time job while you do this side gig? So she talks about that a lot in her career, which is really helpful for those folks who are adamant about working for themselves, because she talks about how hard that was for her and how long it took. This wasn't an overnight thing. So she really put in the work, and in this book, she really talks about how much time, how much work, how much effort went into it. And I really think those who have that entrepreneurial vibe and goal should probably at least read that section of this book, because it highlights some stuff where she was like, yeah, it sucks. Like, you don't go on vacation. Like, you're the end all and be all. So if they're not happy, you have to deal with them. You don't have employees right away to help with anything. Just stuff to be mindful of, versus the fact that we tend to glamorize working for ourselves in this country without really highlighting how difficult it is to get to that place. So just some food for thought that way. She also does talk about Roe v. Wade being overturned and how that had potential to impact her, because at one point she had an ectopic pregnancy. So for those who don't understand what that is basically when the fertilized egg attaches to your fallopian tube and not your uterus. And the problem is, what's going to happen as that tries to grow, it's going to burst the tube. And most women back in the day died. Okay? So with the overturning of Roe v. Wade, the concern becomes, even though it's not a viable pregnancy, is it okay to treat this person, or are they going to get accused of murdering a potential child that was not going to be viable? So she talks about that. She talks about just a lot of things that millennial women have to deal with as well, not just necessarily in the job world, but just in general, right? And maybe in general, this is just women shit that we have to deal with. So she'll talk about being a fan of, the three Bs: Beatles, Beach Boys, Bee Gees. I grew up listening to that because of my mom. My dad was like 80s hair band dude. So I didn't listen to a lot of his music. I listened to more of that poppy stuff, right? But she'll talk about, being asked about who her first concert was, and she feels like she has to lie because the real answer is embarrassing, or, will make her look uncool, especially in front of male employees that might have a say in whether or not she gets promoted, that kind of stuff. So it's always about, like, in a way, some type of censorship, right? And I think maybe women are more likely to do that than men, just because of how we're taught growing up, or because we reach a certain age where we tend to want people to like us, gravitate. I'm not saying men don't feel that, but what I'm saying is society tends to pressure us more for that. So I found that really interesting. Granted, growing up, I was kind of an introverted, nerdy, I wouldn't say loser, but I was just like introverted nerd, had no desire to be popular or that kind of stuff. So I guess in that way, she and I are also different, because she really chased the popularity goal. And talked about how that kind of wasn't very fulfilling for her. So I had the opposite experience where I did get to just kind of be myself. I didn't really feel like I had to lie to my friends in high school about what I liked or what I listened to, that kind of stuff. So as an adult, I think I didn't have as many of these dilemmas that she's talking about. Um, but again, this had some really solid, great nostalgia vibes for me. Um, she even talks about dial up internet. Like, millennials, we know what it's like to be like, get off the phone. I need to use the internet. No one else understands that. No generation is gonna, you know, when asked how old they are, just be like, well, I'm older than Google. Okay? So it's going to be really interesting to see how future generations see us, because a lot of the times, yeah, we get a lot of shit um, on a whole. However, I feel like there's quite a few generations where there tends to be some type of stereotype about them, or just some type of something where it's like, what the hell? So it'll be really interesting as we all age in the millennial uh, generation, how we become known, what we become known for, that kind of thing. So I would say, this is a pretty good nostalgic vibe, definitely geared towards women. You're gonna relate more to this book if you are a woman. So, One in a Millennial, Kate Kennedy. If the book is not your thing, you could probably follow her on Instagram. I think it's Be There in 5. She also still runs her podcast, Be There in 5. Anyway, till next time.